Rella taking it inside this time, loses the ball. Crosby comes up with it, darts the other way, 1-on-2, still gets it to go. The freshman is taking this one over for Central.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
And we welcome you into another edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network and on our YouTube channel. Sean Meyers, Jack Ridenour. And Jack, we got a lot to get to once again on this show. Of course, we're going to have our plays of the week, our team of the week, which is the Belle Vernon area girls. This week, we'll have our trivia question. We'll look ahead at the final week of the WPIAL regular season. But first, our starting five, our big takeaways. And we're to the point now. We mentioned there's 1 week left in the regular season. You start to get a feel for the playoffs. Many teams have already clinched. Many are still in contention. Some, unfortunately, have been eliminated. Let's start with the clinchers on the boys' side in Westmoreland County. We have about a half dozen teams that have already punched their ticket. So we know as of now that the Belle Vernon area, Burles, Derry area, York, Greensburg Central Catholic, Jeanette, and Monessen boys are all in. There's still a lot more to be decided. We'll get to that momentarily. But when you look at these teams, I think that maybe a few surprises in there. I didn't know what to expect from Derry area. You thought that York could be pretty good, but they still had to prove it. Burl, that was a big question mark as well. But ultimately, you look at these teams, and I see Greensburg Central Catholic probably a legitimate title contender. Other than that, I think it's kind of wait and see for some of these teams. There's still a lot to be proven in many regards.
Yeah, I mean, definitely off your point of Burl and Derry, I think those are two very surprising teams. And for York, I think that they're the most surprising team, especially with just how the last few years have gone and then coming into this year. And I mean, hey, winners of 8 in a row, and I know that we'll definitely talk a little bit more about them later on, but they are picking up at a perfect time of the year. But Greensburg Central Catholic, I think that honestly, this is the most complete as well as most consistent team out of the bunch that have made the playoffs already. They have been really good from start to finish, I feel. And for a team that is inconsistent right now, Sean, I think that it's Belle Vernon. I think that 1 minute they're great, 1 minute they're not so great. And at this point of the year, it's kind of which kind of team are you? And I don't think that they've really figured out their identity. So they're a team that I would definitely, watch out for in terms of they could be really good one day or they could be really bad. But the most consistent team out of this bunch, I would say, has been GCC.
Yeah, and the Centurions continue to ride high, and that included a big win at Jeanette last week, and that's a rivalry matchup. We saw firsthand how feisty that gets, but Centurions took care of business on the road. As far as Belle Vernon, I had a chance to see them on Friday, and it's not so much, that they're playing terrible. It's just they're not playing at the level of the top teams, which they had been doing the last several years. Remember, this is a team that has made the semifinals, I think 3 straight years, made a championship game prior to that. So against the Union Towns, against the Laurel Highlands, you figured they would be, blow for blow. And it just really, those games got away from them by and large, well before the fourth quarter even began. So a little disappointing for the Leopards. I think you look at, they've had an inconsistent lineup because they had so many football players who were late to arrive because of the state championship run and then other commitments. But yeah, it's a team that I think it leaves you wanting more in terms of the Leopards. But again, for all of those teams, they're already in the playoffs. So the most important thing now is, 1, solidify your seeding, and 2, build momentum, because really a great regular season means nothing if you can't parlay that into postseason success. So those are the teams that are in. But there is a massive logjam in 5A involving 4 of our teams here in Westmoreland County, where none of them have either been eliminated nor clinched. And this is in Class 5A, Section 3. Kiski area, Franklin Regional, Greater Latrobe, Penn Trafford. The Cavs are 4-4. The Panthers, who are scuffling recently, and the Wildcats are 3-5. Penn Trafford somehow still alive at 2-6. This is going to be captivating to watch down the stretch here, Jack.
Well, you mentioned the Franklin Regional Panthers. I mean, they are really starting to unravel at the worst time of year. I mean, they have not won a game since January 10th, and we're already into February. So they're really faltering at the worst time of year. They've got a big game. Injuries have really hit them hard. And right now, and we'll mention it throughout this, later on when we talk about some of the girl clinchers and some teams that right now they don't have, I think, that reserve or that presence coming off the bench that can kind of uplift them through this tough injury spell they're going through. They've got a big game against Gateway that right now, I mean, again, that is a must win right now for Franklin Regional. And to your point about Penn Trafford, I think it's impressive that they've been able to just clench on to dear life for the playoffs at 2-6 in the conference, 5-15 overall. But I'm really looking at this Franklin Regional game on Tuesday as a game that they must win if they want to even have any remote chance of making it into the postseason.
Yeah, and so again, 2 teams have clinched out of that section, that being Gateway and McKeesport. The other 4 teams, none are guaranteed in, but none are eliminated. And keep in mind, there is a chance that the section could take more than the 4 teams because of tiebreakers, whatnot. So we know 2 of those teams guaranteed will get in, but there's a chance that 3 or potentially maybe even all 4 could get in out of Class 5A, Section 3. Well, we talked about the boys clinchers for the playoffs with the week remaining. Let's look at the girls teams that are already in, some that we've kind of known for a while now. The Norwin Knights, Penn Trafford Warriors, Greater Latrobe Wildcats, Greensburg-Salem Golden Lions, Belle Vernon Area Leopards, the York Cougars, certainly a big surprise, Greensburg Central Catholic, and Monessen. We've talked a lot about Norwin. We've focused on Penn Trafford and Greater Latrobe, the Wildcats clinching with the victory earlier this week against Albert Gallatin. Belle Vernon area, a team really surging. So I think there's some really quality teams in there and multiple teams that are going to be real threats in postseason.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Norwin girls, I feel, every single week, and for good reason. I mean, they have been impressive the entire way through, so they're going to be dangerous. But Belle Vernon, they are a team that is picking up steam again. They're getting their momentum and putting the pieces together at the perfect time of year. Right now, winners of 7 in a row, and they're being led by, that great senior class that they have with Jenna Dawson. She's been healthy for most of the season, which was very different for last year. And so having that chemistry and having that 4 or 5 really strong core group of seniors together, that is a perfect kind of recipe to take you through into a big playoff run. But also the Yacht girls, they've been really good, winners of 4 of their last 5. I know that they just had their winning streak snapped, but still they're also surging at a perfect time of year. The one team I'm very curious about, Sean, is Greater Latrobe. Can they stay healthy? Can they stay consistent? Because we've seen them hit really high strides. We've seen them hit really low points. What type of Greater Latrobe team will we see in 2 weeks?
Yeah, and again, the Wildcats and the Warriors are already in, but we've seen the top 2 teams in that section, McKeesport and Oakland Catholic, and it feels like there's kind of a big drop-off between the top 2 and the next 2, and so that's taking nothing away from Penn Trafford, Greater Latrobe, but certainly I don't think anyone's going to be looking at them as favorites heading into the playoffs. So you look at these, these top teams, and certainly McKeesport and Oakland Catholic are in that discussion. Well, let's focus on a couple more specific teams now for our starting 5 takeaways. And we highlighted that the York Cougars boys are already in the playoffs. But it's not just about being in the playoffs at this point, Jack. They have a chance to potentially tie for this section supremacy. First place currently along with Washington. And they actually defeated the Little Prexies in the most recent matchup. So the Cougars, I saw them in December have what was really a deflating loss at home against Brownsville. But they look like a different team now. And I think the most impressive thing in that win against Washington, it wasn't just Tara Crosby who went off by himself. They got really great contributions from a couple of, role players, if you will.
Well, I mean, when you have a situation in you're getting close to the playoff time, that's where wins and losses come very far and few between. When your bench, your reserves, your other guys can step up and your role players can kind of fill in those voids. But what I think this Yacht team has really been able to ride through this 8-game winning streak that they're currently on is defense. They're right now allowing the fewest amount of points in all of 3A at 40 points a game. 40 points a game. So they've really relied heavily on defense, and reading some things that Coach Jim Nesser has mentioned that, it's been defense for them all year long, but it's not the offense that's been so consistent. But recently it's been consistent. And so if they can put those 2 together, and they've seemed to be able to put those 2 together. I mean, they're coming off a win against Mount Pleasant, 52-17. They put together a 24-0 run over 2 quarters. Holding a team to no points over 16 minutes of basketball is very hard to do. So I think this Yacht team, I mean, they are really scary. And I would, if I'm a team that's going up against them in 3A right now, I would want no business with them right now.
Yeah, it was Tyler Trevelyan who had that big showing against the Little Prexies. And then Jim Nesser said he was worried about that game at home against Mount Pleasant because you get up for this big road victory and naturally you're expecting a letdown. And it didn't happen. As you mentioned, they took care of business. So this is a team that is really rounding into form. And, we haven't talked a lot about York athletics over the past handful of years. It's, aside from softball and baseball, the winter sports and the fall sports really have struggled by and large. But man, this is a breakthrough winter campaign for York, both the boys and girls postseason bound. And again, the boys making a lot of noise. We will conclude our starting five takeaways with the Greensburg Central Catholic girls. And this is a little bit more of a sour note. They had what they had not really experienced all season long. That is a losing streak. Understandable when you look at the teams they lost to. They lost to McKeesport, which is a much bigger school and a very great Tigers team. And then they lost against Sarah Catholic. So this team split the section. But we'll see how Coach Sketel's group responds from this, because they had not endured a losing streak at all this season. They had just 2 losses total through their first 18 contests, now 2 straight.
Well, yeah, their previous loss before losing to McKeesport was back on December 28th of 2022. So it's been well over a month since the last time that they had really tasted defeat. And I think for them, that is so deflating for their recent loss against Sarah Catholic, outside of the fact that they already beat Sarah Catholic this year. Sarah Catholic had 8 players on their roster and only 7 dressed. So they were already down to basically 2 reserves. And you figure somebody gets into foul trouble, really you only have 6 players. But really it was for Greensburg Central Catholic. They got hit with some foul trouble. They could not hit any shots. And now with that loss, it's putting a lot of pressure on GCC to win out the rest of the season and really finish out strong if they want to be able to share a title for the section title, or even win it outright because of the loss to Sarah Catholic. So that was a very, very crucial loss for them last week. And it's going to be interesting to see how they carry out the rest of the year, because you never want to go into the playoffs on a losing streak. And especially when you're getting those losses into February and late January, you need to figure out a way to compartmentalize that, put that in the past, and focus at the task at hand, which is 2 more games. They've got Clarendon and Winchester Thurston coming up this week. They beat both those teams earlier this year, so they should be able to take care of business.
Yeah, and let me ask your perspective on this real quick. Winchester Thurston at 7-3 is currently in 3rd. The Bears are 7-4. They're the 4th place teams. So these are 2 other playoff teams that GCC is going against. Is that more favorable to have more challenges as opposed to a couple of cupcake games to, we're going to get back into win column because we're going against teams that are not anywhere close talent wise? Would you rather play those competitive matchups to wrap up the season, even with the potential that you could lose another game?
I feel that if you were to try and schedule out, and maybe put together the schedule of when you play those really tough out of conference teams, for instance, like a McKeesport, if you put that at the beginning of your schedule, then you really kind of get an idea early on in the year of, okay, what does it take and what do we need to do as a team to be able to play up against a team that is much larger than us in size and in classification, and in maybe some regards just better than us talent-wise. They have deeper talent maybe. So what do we need to do so then we can take a little bit of that from that recipe and take it down with us to our classification so that we can be the top dogs in our classification? So I think that it's great that they were able to play a team in McKeesport, this again, late into the season. I would personally like that earlier in the year, because you don't want to have, again, a deflating loss that your team has to think about, because you lose 1 game and then you lose 2 games and then you start thinking about it. Then that what if starts creeping in of, oh boy, what if we lose the 3rd game? What if we lose the 4th game? Oh man, what if we falter on a 16-win season? So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that they play a team that is, again, really good in competition at a later point of the season. I would personally put it at the beginning of the year. That's just me. But I think that they can definitely now have an idea of, okay, we have seen, quite frankly, a championship caliber team in McKeesport. We can take a little bit of their mold. Let's apply it to what we can do, and then let's try and build on it. And again, the fact that, they don't come out with a victory against Sarah Catholic, that again is maybe a little bit more of a sign of, maybe they thought about that McKeesport loss a little bit too long, but they have to be able to, again, put that behind them, have amnesia, and focus on this week.
And Sarah Catholic, I think, along with GCC, they are both legitimate title contenders in 2A. That'll do it for our starting 5 takeaways, but we waste no time here on the Hardwood Podcast. We will quickly transition to our plays of the week, and we begin in a familiar spot with the Norwin girls. The Knights got back to their winning ways last week It was their decisive win at home against Butler on Monday that was highlighted by an alley-oop from Lauren Pelangio to Kendall Berger, as called by myself and Jack.
Is that the ref that's going to go back and watch, Jack?
It might be, yeah. I think it is.
Berger with an alley-oop! What a finish for Kendall Berger! As Bonai comes up with the steal, and the Knights starting to take this one over. That is a play that you almost never see in high school girls basketball.
I don't want to jump the gun, but we might see that for Westmoreland on the Hardwood next week.
Jack, it's a play. When you say alley-oop, of course, you think he finished with the slam dunk. On the girls' side, it was a layup, but man, what a terrific play, and that shows the talent of this Knights team.
Yeah, and just their ability to execute offensively. I mean, if this team is firing on all cylinders defensively and offensively, watch out.
We continue plays of the week with the Greensburg Central Catholic boys, and it was Samir Crosby, the freshman for the Centurions, who was instrumental in the road win at Jeanette on Tuesday, and he punctuated that by his steal and finish in the third quarter, as called by Brent Wiggum and Anthony D'Annunzio.
Isaiah Malik joining on the spot, though, comes down with the rebound. Morello taking it inside this time, loses the ball. Crosby comes up with it, darts the other way, 1-on-2, still gets it to go. The freshman is taking this one over for Central.
What a move by Samir Crosby. Incredible.
Don't get him. We have seen Samir Crosby on the gridiron, on the hardwood. He is a special player. And Jeanette GCC means a lot. I think it might even be more special for him. He is a native of Jeanette. So a nice little moment there for Samir and helping his team get the victory. And we'll conclude plays of the week, Jack. You want to certainly stick around to watch this one. This is a good one. Now, I'll preface this. Laurel Highlands is not a Westmoreland County team, but they played against Belle Vernon area on Friday night. We had the coverage, and I think this play certainly deserves to make plays of the week because it was a star-studded battle at Belle Vernon area. 3 future Division I athletes were all involved in this spectacular play as the Leopards' Quentin Martin guarded the Laurel Highlands' Rodney Gallagher, but it was the Mustangs' Keandre DeShield who grabbed the spotlight as called by myself and Greg Visignani.
Martin is taking away Gallagher a little bit. We'll see. He's going to take him outside the hoop and maybe isolate him here. We'll see a little bit of athleticism on athleticism here.
Martin able to fight for the screen. He's fired up.
Yeah, this is a good, fun to watch here.
He's talking to Rodney. And Gallagher misses, but DeShields follows it up. Well, Martin did his job, but no one could check Keandre DeShields.
Yeah, that was a great follow-up dunk.
And DeShields is fouled. That's deflating, I would think, to some extent for the Leopards.
Oh, absolutely. Martin did a great job, worked really hard on defense, and Gallagher made him take a very tough shot, but nobody boxes out DeShields, and he comes right in, easy put back with his athleticism.
The DeShields dunk, my friend, threw it. I would say maybe you got to give Gallagher a little assist on that. Threw it off the backboard and perfect timing by DeShields.
Yeah, that's a next level play. DeShields and Gallagher, both football commits. DeShields going to St. Francis, Gallagher going to WPU. And of course, we know Quentin Martin can go anywhere in the country that he wants for football. That'll do it for plays of the week. We will now continue with our team of the week. We talked about them briefly earlier, the Belle Vernon area girls. And Jack, this Leopards squad, 7 games consecutively in the win column. That improved their record to 14-6, more importantly, 10-1 in Class 4A Section 3. And so we try to keep it to what they did over the past week, which was a couple of notable wins. They scored a 53-45 win at home against Laurel Highlands and then won at Southmoreland 56-34. But really, you can go back 3 weeks now. This team has been absolutely humming. And it was a slow start, but this team, it does not look like the squad that got out of the gate pretty slow here in 22-23.
Well, I mentioned earlier, in the podcast about their chemistry, and I think that is what's been able to keep them together and really kind of pull them through this 7-game winning streak right now is their ability. As I was reading an interesting article that this group of seniors, this 4 or 5 group of seniors, they've been playing together since about 4th or 5th grade. So you think 10 plus years of sharing the court with one another. They know exactly where each other are going to be, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and why it's going to happen. When you have a team that can do all of those things and they're starting to roll at this point of the year, I mean, I'm looking at some of these scores, and again, this might be a typo. I don't think it is, but holding a team in Uniontown to 10 points in an
47-10. Yep.
Yeah, 32 minutes and 10 points. Again, that is, I think, a team that is, they're not only winning, but they're winning with a statement. And I think that right now, this senior group, they want to go out on a high note for their final year of high school basketball. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. They're putting all the pieces together.
Yeah, and some of those seniors you talked about, Jenna Dawson, a guard, forward Farrah Reeder. You also have to give a lot of credit to Caitlin Slagus, the head coach. So they lost one of their key players before the season. She decided that she was not going to play basketball. She was going to focus on other athletics. And that's not easy because we've seen sometimes you lose a player that maybe you expect is going to be one of your key components. And it's like, well, where do we go from here? We saw that with Southmoreland. Now, that was due to injury, but they've not been able to overcome the loss of Olivia Cernuto. So maybe that factors into the slow start. It's also games against Seton LaSalle Baldwin, non-section, so it doesn't really hurt you. But once section play has begun, this team has been incredible. Their only loss is against Elizabeth Forward, but you have to go all the way back to January 12th for that one. And ironically, their next matchup is against Elizabeth Forward on the road at EF. That will really test the mettle of the Leopards. That could be a game that determines the section outcome.
Yeah, and especially, how that final, went down the last game that they played, 65-43 in favor of Elizabeth Forward. So it's a bad taste right now in Belle Vernon's mouth. And I'm sure that Coach Slagus has had that score up on the blackboard, the chalkboard, the whiteboard, whatever they have in their locker room, circled and dated and saying, we are not allowing that to ever happen again. And in a coach that was a tremendous player in her own right, played Division I at Bucknell, she's going to obviously have a lot of experience to bring over into this kind of portion of the season at crucial time of the year. So I think that this Belle Vernon team and against this Elizabeth Forward team, I think it could be very much of a different outcome the last time.
Yeah, and Slagus is also a Belle Vernon area grad, so I think it means a little bit more. She's been through this, and she knows what these players. She's still very young in her own right, so that allows her to relate. I think when you have a coach in their 20s, it just naturally lends itself to relatability with the player. So this team is certainly peaking at the right time. I mentioned EF. They'll wrap up the regular season non-section at Franklin Regional, but we've already mentioned they are postseason bound, and they look like a team who can make a postseason run. We continue here on the Hardwood Podcast with our trivia question. First, let's look back at last week's question. And this was heading into action on January 30th, which is when we asked this question. Which Westmoreland County girls team had the best scoring defense? The answer, Greensburg-Salem, allowing 33.5 points per game. I checked as of right now, it is actually Monessen that has the best scoring defense. Norwin's in there as well. So there's a lot of teams really playing good defense here in Westmoreland County. Again, under 35 points per game. You're doing plenty right on that end. So Greensburg-Salem, the answer to last week's trivia question. This week, Norwin coach Brian Brozeski was honored last week with his 200th career coaching victory. Which other basketball coach in Westmoreland County achieved career win number 200 this week? So if you know the answer, you can give us your guess by tweeting at WestmorelandSN. Use the hashtag #OnTheHardwood. Once again, Brian Brzezinski of the Norwin Girls was honored recently for win number 200 in his career. Which other Westmoreland County basketball coach garnered career win number 200 this week? We will have the answer on next week's show. Speaking of next week, Jack, let's wrap up with a look ahead. The final week of the regular season. For some of these teams, it might be their final week of games. For others, they're going to try to either get into the playoffs or, again, improve their playoff seeding. And we'll begin with the boys' matchups this week. Tuesday, Gateway at Franklin Regional. You highlighted that one briefly. We'll have that one on the Westmoreland Sports Network. We'll also have the Clairton Bears at Greensburg Central Catholic, Shadyside Academy at Derry area, and Penn Trafford at Greater Latrobe. Other Westmoreland County notable games on Tuesday. And then Friday, Norwin at Hempfield area. We'll have that on WSN. We will also have the Kiski area at Penn Trafford boys matchup. And then also on Friday, Elizabeth Forward at Belle Vernon area. Borough at Valley, and Derry area at Ligonier Valley. Anything that jumps out on the boys' side?
Clearly Gateway and Franklin Regional. I mean, like I said before, it's do or die for Franklin Regional. It's win or go home at this point. I know that obviously they, again, they do have some other life, I'm sure, if they lose and other teams lose as well, but they have to just focus on winning, and that's all they need to focus on right now. So that's a game that really, I think, stands out to me. And then obviously Kiski area and Penn Trafford on Friday. That has a ton of implications in it too. So right now, Class 5A, Section 3, we're paying really, really close attention to. We've got a big magnifying glass on it.
Yeah, Gateway and Franklin Regional came down to the wire the first time as well. The Gators escaped with a victory. They'll go for it, the season sweep. On the girls' side, Monday, Pine Richland at Norwin. We will have that coverage on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Knight's already in the playoffs. Some other big ones. Belle Vernon area at Elizabeth Forward. We just talked about that with the Leopards. Mount Pleasant at Ligonier Valley. And Clareton at Greensburg Central Catholic. Tuesday, Plum at Kiski area. Thursday, Belle Vernon area at Franklin Regional. Non-section, but still a notable matchup for a couple of Westmoreland County teams. And then Friday, Greater Latrobe at Penn Trafford. We will have that one as well on WSN. Both those teams are already in the playoffs, Jack, and yet it might determine third versus fourth place. And so anytime Greater Latrobe and Penn Trafford match up, there's also a lot on the line, because the backstory is 2 consecutive years, Penn Trafford and Greater Latrobe played for a win and you're in game at the end of the season. One team would make the playoffs, one team would miss it. Penn Trafford won both times. So I don't know if any of the girls are still around that remember that, but I would say that John Janikis and Mark Burkhart, the respective head coaches, remember that. So Greater Latrobe probably looking for a little bit of payback on that one. And then collegiately, Wednesday, Edinburgh at Seton Hill. We'll have the doubleheader, both the women's and the men's on WSN. Jack, final thoughts on this show?
We've got a great week ahead of us, Sean. Excited for how the regular season finishes out and how we carry it over into the postseason.
And for these seniors who might be playing for the final time, your last couple of chances to leave it all out there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's how you want to finish out your high school career, how you want to, carry out your legacy. And for some players, this is their last ever competitive basketball game. Some of them might not go and play collegiately. So you want to go out on a high note.
Well, let's try to go out on a high note here on the Hardwood Podcast. Again, reminder, check out westmorelandsports.com each and every day. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. But that'll do it for this edition. We will have a very special playoff edition next week. But for now, we say farewell. For Jack, this is Sean. You've been tuning in to the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast here on the Westmoreland Sports Network.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.